This episode of Plastic Weekly is brought to you by John Gross and the rest of my Patreon supporters who help make this show by donating $1 or $2 each week. Thank you, John, and I hope you found a place to show off your new Plastic Weekly stickers. It feels like I start a new series of episodes every damn week. I'm sorry, but whatever, I'm excited about these. Today's episode is the first of 3 that peek into the climbing hold industry and ask about the different materials we're using to make grips. It's that kind of climbing podcast. Fortunately, I'm talking to someone who is arguably the most diehard fan of plastic climbing holds on Earth, a man who has shaped thousands of grips, worked for a bunch of the most influential companies in climbing, and is one of the only guys on Earth to qualify as a climbing celebrity without actually climbing that much. I'll give you 3 seconds to guess. All right now I'm talking to Ian Powell, the owner and shaper, or one of the shapers at least, at Kilter Climbing Grips. Thanks a lot for taking a second to sit down and chat with me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about plastic and foam and shapes and stuff anytime. So
good.
Yeah, thank you.
That's exactly what I want to talk about. This is probably going to be the most boring series of episodes anyone ever does about climbing, just talking about pretty well material sciences or stuff like that. So we'll get on with it. We're going to talk about plastic. And I want to know, you have a really long history with holds and shaping. And so I'm just going to start straight up with when did your relationship with plastic begin?
Yeah, 91. I thought I was the oldest, and then Louis came in at like 1990. So damn it, Louis wins again. But Typhus and I both were kind of living together. We were really super good friends. Went to high school together, traveled around together. We were living at this big gym in Berkeley called Emeryville, and started shaping holds out of wood. Ty started shaping out of wood. Then I moved here to Boulder I was trying to be a competition climber and just came to Boulder to train and focus on that. But I, wasn't really in the cards for me to stand on the podium anywhere. So I found Straight Up, which was Boulder Holds, and then Straight Up Climbing. They were the climbing hold company here. Yes, so Chaz Fisher was the guy who owned Boulder. And Boulder Holds was the first company to make bright colored holds. Like there were only earth tones before he did it, as far as we can tell. So first guy in the world to do primary colored bright holds. Like if you were a climber then, if you were a climber then, there was only a few companies, and every company only had about 100 shapes, right? Or maybe 150. Yeah. And so we all climbed on exactly the same stuff everywhere.
I got to ask, how were brightly colored holds, how did people respond to that when they first started showing up? Were they popular with everybody, or were they kind of looked down upon as like a kid's hold kind of thing?
Yeah, no, I've never asked Chaz that. That's really interesting. Because he did that a year or two before I got there, a couple years before I got there. And so by the time I got there, it was cool with us. I mean, Ty and I, like I said, we went to high school together in Waco, Texas, and we learned to climb. At the time, we didn't know where the limestone was because it's all hidden in the trees.
Yeah.
So we learned to climb on like old bridges and churches and stuff like that. So, I mean, I spent a lot more time on the side of a school than inside the school, I think. And so we were into artificial holds. So for us, there was no. I think that's one of the strengths of some of us that have learned to shape. There's some connection where we're actually totally happy with plastic. Like I've always liked climbing inside and plastic, and for me, there's no battle. That's a good point. I think at that time he must have had. Yeah, there must have been plenty of people that were like, no, this is not. I don't want a yellow hold and a red hold. But yeah, so by the time I got here, it just felt like standard. It felt normal. Mm-hmm. And then. So I got I was just really into shaping, man. And I did everything there. Chaz taught me how to shape, but also how to mold, how to pour the plastic, how to mix it, I sanded the holds, we drilled the holds. We had a small crew, but, we did everything.
The material you were working with compared to what we've got today, what has changed in terms of just the material itself, and why did those changes come about?
Right. So everything was polyester resin back then, in the 90s. So pretty much all the way through the end of the 90s, America transitioned out at the end. So we just, we recognized right away that the walls, especially in the 90s, American walls were concrete and uneven. So we were just shattering holds constantly, right? And some companies were going the other way. They were just trying to save money. And so holds by the late 90s, there was a couple of major brands and holds were just so brittle. They were just shattering, which is what they still do in Europe when they use the PE. And basically, I watched Pat Adams, who's this kind of famous old boulder climber. He was in the Rock Club in, I don't know, 97 or 98 or something. And he broke a jug at the top of a climb and threw it across the, because you're not going to hold onto a jug. Yeah. So, he threw a 10-pound spinning, a very sharp, when some materials break, they fracture in a really sharp line. So he threw a 10-pound knife blade across a gym at 8 o'clock at night and didn't happen to hit anybody. But it was just really clear. I was just done. I'm like, fuck that. I was just fucking done. Like we have to stop this now. And so right about that same time, some guy, I'll never know who this guy was. Maybe you'll hear this and speak up. There was a guy who worked at a rollerblade wheel factory next to Boulder in a little town called Louisville. But it was Kryptonic's rollerblade wheels. So like super, maybe the biggest rollerblade wheel supplier in the world or biggest name, one of them. Because this is rollerblading was really still, right?
Yeah, I totally remember other people doing that. Yeah.
Other people, I did once. I was okay. That was great. Moving on, but yeah, people loved it. So, all right. So the rollerblading, it was about to implode. We didn't know that, but a few years later. But some guy, a climber, worked on the line, and he walked in one day with this just pile of polyurethane that he had squeezed out and stuck a washer in, and maybe he even made a rock mold or something, and he threw it on the ground, and it was polyurethane, so it couldn't break. And I was just like, oh my God, this is it. So, and I don't remember all the years, but it's just basically late 90s, somewhere in there. And so we just started pursuing that. And so we actually, Ty and I think we already had e-grips up and going. So we just started we approached Kryptonics and said, hey, do you want to do this? And they were like, nah, we're good. We're making rollerblade wheels. So we basically went down the road to a couple of other polyurethane factories and just started teaching people how to make climbing holds and basically working with them. And so the first people we went to were a little small urethane group, a couple of guys in a lab in Boulder, and they made polyurethane holds with sand in them, which are really dope because as the holds wear down, you just expose more sand. It's amazing. It also destroys polyurethane pumps. Like putting sand through your mix, your pumps is insane. The only people who would do that are these tech guys who built their own pumps. So the first polyurethane mix we ever had was amazing, and you can still find them. We only made a few thousand, and you can still find them, and they're the same. They're just rubber sandstone. But the guy walks in one day. We were working with him for a few months, and he walks in and he throws down a hold. He throws down like a little E-Grips crimper, and it's made out of this weird spongy material. And he goes, yeah, that's $85 worth of material, and I just got the contract. I just got the contract to coat the U.S. nuclear submarine fleet in 2 inches of that.
Oh,
so I'm a millionaire, and I'm moving to San Diego on Monday. I mean, he was a millionaire. He's like, yeah, I'm good. So you guys are great. I love making climbing holds, but I'm sorry, gotta go.
Wow.
And he was awesome, and that was it, man. We're like, yeah, dude, can't argue with that. Because that was $1.25 in our material. So that was the coolest, in a lot of ways, the coolest mix I've ever seen, and that was gone. Then we taught a factory in Denver to make them for a while, and they were cool. They were a little too transparent, just too chintzy looking, So some urethanes are just a little too bubble gummy or something. And then we went back to Kryptonics and rollerblading had tanked. So it was a couple years later, and they're like, yeah, we're interested in climbing holds. And we knew that would change the world. We actually, at least our little corner of the world, climbing holds. The mix, that was a period where we used to drive around the country, we'd visit gyms, and we'd throw them on the ground, and then they would just bounce,
Yeah. It's a pretty good sales pitch.
Yeah, it was at the time. It was great because that was the only problem. And this instant, just no one had ever seen anything like that. So it was a cool pitch. Yeah. The first couple of years they were a little too rubbery, So people would kind of freak out because they're kind of bent,
Yeah.
especially little thin E-grips end cuts, rah, 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 off the wall. And so, there was some resistance, but, and it took Aragon a couple of years to get an amazing mix, but really like by 5 years later, their mix was the best in the world, and it's kind of stayed there. So it even took them a few years, but yeah. The Voodoo, at the same time, Voodoo's never really got credit for this, but Voodoo also got into polyurethane. They just didn't tell anybody. They kind of they just went a different way with it, which I understand. They made holds that weren't chipping, and they just didn't tell anybody why. Ty and I were the opposite. We thought about patenting it, and then we realized we're a couple of stoned 25-year-olds in a warehouse, and that we couldn't defend a patent, and we didn't want to. We didn't want to spend our life like that, so we just gave up. And we just told everybody, like, yeah, can we all start making them out of urethane, please? And it took a few years, and now, that's it.
Yeah. Wow. These changes along the way, two parts. The first one is, how has this switch from polyester to polyurethane affected the economy of holds? And actually, I'll let you answer that first before I answer the second one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're more expensive, period. To answer the full economic question, the products certainly last longer. So we're paying more, but we're getting, holds are now 5 to 10 year products instead of, well, I mean, who knows? A heavy polyester one, if you drop it wrong, well, that's it. You're done. And the companies, one of the reasons this had to happen is because it's straight up. By the end of straight up, I was spending a third of my day replacing holds. And we replaced them for free. So I got to unpack the box from a customer, open it, see what's broken, pour it, replace it. We pay for shipping.
Yeah,
I think that probably sunk the company, because I think that's probably why Straight Up went out of business. We just couldn't handle it, So the economics is healthier for the company. We're just not breaking stuff nearly as bad. And but yeah, there are more. Holds are a lot. I'm kind of mixed on it. Holds, it kind of shocks me how much they cost sometimes. I grew up kind of poor and was an irresponsible adult, so remained poor until pretty much now. I'm working on it still, but honestly, I don't like to really think about how much they are, because it's fair. We're not making, we make a reasonable little margin, and that's it. But they, sometimes I'm like, God damn, that's a lot. Like $30 for a jug. That's a lot. But it is what it is, So.
And the other question, kind of similar, is how have the changes in plastic affected the design of holds?
Oh yeah, now that is one of my favorite things, because all my favorite holds right now are super low profile tapered stuff, and that we can only do in polyurethane. You just forget it in polyester. It would instantly shatter and chip all the way around. Look, the classic old pusher, all the cool old pusher holds, the Boss, everything is it's surrounded by a ring of chips, right?
Yeah, man. It's a huge crimp. I feel you.
Yeah, always is. Yeah, they just look nasty and everything. Well, so and like Jason Kell. Jason used to do this bubby shape. He's been doing that bubby shape for 15 years. It's just that he used to turn them into pusher, and all the other companies, was it Etch and other companies, and we'd try to make them, at those places. Sometimes, I was really close to the pusher guys, so I'd roll them to town, and mold and stuff, and we'd deal with that stuff. But that bubby flare, of course, that's always going to chip in polyester. So
that's true.
Jason's been trying to get that shape done for years, and now polyurethane, we can do it. And yeah, so my obsession is just taper, especially dual tex and taper. And so now we can get stuff that's so low profile and dual tex, there's no way anybody's standing on top of it. And it's so thin, you don't even want to. Again, in sort of a concept in design, I think, is that people talk about form and function working together, but kind of specifically, I think when we're using it, when we're a climber, we're looking down on it, not only should we not stand on it, but the visual of it is so extreme, you don't even want to. I think that's a good design. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
When there's a dual text hold that still kind of comes in steeply to the wall, like then you're like, should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Like, I guess I'll try to stand on it,
Yeah.
right? Fuck all that. Like, I want it to broadcast itself as, dude, you don't want to mess with this. Just stop. Like, not even for a second does your mind think this is going to work. So that is a cool design to me, and that's the only way we can do it is in polyurethane, or maybe fiberglass.
So we already mentioned Aragon as kind of the dominant company in
Right.
at least pouring climbing holds. So they're the guys behind a lot of the plastic for the biggest names and holds right now in North America, at the very
Right.
least. Um, Now, Aragon started as a polyurethane company, I'm guessing, or at least they have a background in
Yeah.
chemistry, and they didn't come from a climbing perspective. Is there any chance of a climbing hold company getting to that same level unless they really invest in chemists and material
Right.
scientists and all that kind of stuff, or have Aragon
No.
basically locked it down?
Well, yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that. This is my little online mission. Like, several times a year, I have to type on like, okay, come on, if you're pouring in buckets, you don't get to have the same quality mix. So just to back up, so the story of Aragon is a little more interesting than most people know. So the head of Aragon, the head of that rollerblade wheel company, Kryptonics, is a guy named Chuck Demarest. He's world famous in polyurethane in industry. If you talk to anybody, like I talked to a kid the other day who's just fresh out of college who has been studying plastics. He told me, he was like starstruck. He's like, dude, you know Chuck Demarest, right? He's like, that guy goes around the world and gives speeches and everything about I don't know what about some of the qualities. I've never caught one of
Wow.
his speeches, but so he's like this fucking plastic guru. And that just happened to be the third factory Ty and I walked into. It just happened to be right next to Boulder, Colorado. So that was just amazing luck for everybody. Chuck has also been up Everest twice, the mountain.
Yeah.
Uh, so he was a climber. So when he got really motivated to work with us. And yeah, so to answer your question, another part of your question, can anybody do it? Yeah, I mean, if they want to get giant post curing ovens and preheating ovens and autoclaves and vacuum chambers, and I mean, I'm talking, like a couple thousand gallon vacuum chambers and just massive pieces of, like, it's like a backstory for the Joker in there. It's like they're chemical places, man. And so all of that works together to get a hold that's, all the materials are preheated and post cured and cooked and like I said, vacuum chambered and just dealt with in a really professional way. Everybody else, and I used to do this too. Like, pretty much every other company is taking 5 gallon buckets emptied out of a 55 gallon drum and mixing it in 5 gallon buckets with paddle mixers and dumping them into molds. And it's a great business. And I always try to walk the line between, like, I'm never trying to really harsh on these companies. Um, I just I want everybody to understand the difference, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
You right, and look, and it's not just that. The reality is the mixes that you make on your own, they don't have the same qualities. If they did, okay, cool, amazing. We could, I would be the first person to say it, but I see what the quality differences are. And the other cool part is that for the most part, companies respect the price difference. So, you can imagine that 5 gallon buckets from Home Depot and a high torque paddle drill doesn't cost you as much as 1,000 gallon vacuum chamber, et cetera, et cetera. So, the stuff's more expensive from Aragon and Composite X, but hey, it lasts longer. And so the BT mixes cost less, last less. So it's very fair. And I only step out and say something when I sense that somebody's trying to suggest that it's all equal. And then I get my feathers up. I'm like, yeah, it ain't, man. It's not like let's just be honest. Like, I want my part of the world to remain honest. I don't like dishonesty in advertising.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah,
You mentioned, breakability and wear as two things that you feel are big parts of polyurethane manufacturing. Something for me is color. That's always been a huge deal for me, and everybody's on kind of a different part of the color purist spectrum. You know, like some people will tolerate a certain amount of difference between red and red and red. And I'm not that guy. I'm really anal about it.
Yeah, good. Cool.
So is it possible for those companies pouring in buckets to at least match color consistency with some place like Aragon, where I'm sure there is, again, lots of equipment that goes into pouring these perfect reds and perfect yellows and all that kind of stuff?
I think, I mean, I'll always just give you the most honest answer I can. I think, yeah, I can't any reason why you can't get a pretty perfect color match. It's not easy. It's tricky. But there's that part. I don't see anything in the processes, from what I understand about touring these factories and having relationships with these factories and then knowing what it is to pour your own stuff. I don't see any reason why you can't get a great color match. The base colors for urethanes change. So there's kind of an amber color to some. Some of them are completely clear, transparent. That is the part that gets hard, right? But color, I don't see any reason why they can't get a great color match. And I think they have. I think all of the non-Aragon and non-Composite X companies, I think they've gotten a lot better. I feel like color matching has gotten a lot better in the last few years.
I'd agree with better for sure, but there have been a few times where, you get the claim that,
sure,
we now Aragon match and you get that red and it's not that red, man.
And it's not. Well, hey, look, we've seen, sometimes you'll see a little difference in Aragon colors, and
that's true.
We haven't gotten right. So there's sometimes when we see that. So, but we've never seen one where, we notice it and we're like, oh, well, that's not my favorite thing in the world, but probably it's cool. We haven't seen them go so far off that we thought it was over the line.
Yeah.
But I'm like you, man. I want perfect colors. I mean, it's only been a couple of years. When Kingdom and us, like you said, we kind of came on strong at Aragon. For the first couple of years, the old companies at Aragon wouldn't let us share colors. Mm-hmm. They were like, no way, man, which is not, I can't say that I like the decision at all. And I don't think it was good for the market, but it was, you could see the logic there. They were trying to protect themselves and their sales. And then eventually Kingdom and us got just too big, and Aragon was like, no, man, come on, we gotta all share them. And that was the last kind of really cool thing that happened in this country that I think helped out setters,
Yeah. I was really interested at that time, kind of seeing the dialogue between root setters and just kind of some actual action coming out of the market and hearing it come from the buyers and then also the producers, and kind of working together to figure out what colors do we like, what colors do we not like, where can we land on it. That was really neat back then. Yeah.
Well, and look, and now we have a weird choice being made between us and Europe. So we don't know, like it. We've obviously got there's basically a European standard and North American standard. Is there going to be a world standard? And if so, what do we pick? I think the Composite X red is
glad.
Brighter than the Aragon red.
Yeah, right? I'm really glad you brought that up, because I want to ask you about Europe, and the color thing is one I want to kind of debate with you. But so you've been spending some time in Europe working. I think you've been hanging out with Composite X guys, or you've been kind of bringing your kilter stuff over there. What have you been up to out there?
Yep. Well, let's see. I was in 2015, I went over to meet Dan at Composite X. I saw some of Dan's holds, like, after I was kind of retired from life and clubbing and everything. And so I came back in 2011 or 12. And some of the first holds I saw were Dan's. I saw him at the spot, and I didn't know who this guy was, but I'm like, this is a cool hold. It was such a clean hollow back. And I tell the story all the time that I wanted to find that guy and work with him, or that person, whoever made it. And so it took me a few years, and we had to concentrate on growing and get enough money to afford a trip to Europe.
Yeah.
So I went and met with Daniel French, and Daniel French he's Mr. Composite X. Composite X is owned partly by Waltopia, but it's Dan's house. It's all him. And so, I went over in 2015, and he actually thought he had a great polyurethane, and in a lot of ways he did. It was pretty tough. It's pretty cool, blah, blah, blah. But we looked at it, and it turned out it was good. It was about to polish everywhere. He had sort of gone down this road of a very stiff urethane, which is one way to get toughness. So anyway, we knew we had to have a European manufacturer to supply Europe. We knew that it wasn't just not economical to ship back and forth. It's not your first choice. You should have a North American supplier if you want to sell in North America and vice versa. That's better. You don't have to, but it's better. So I went to meet him, work with him, and we looked at his mix, and I said no in 2015. I just knew, I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And sure enough, somewhere pretty soon after, that mix just exploded. And so, I mean, I think it nearly sunk Flathold. I think they were bombed because Flathold has sold a lot of that mix, and they just got so greasy. So Dan, he went and he worked all of 2016 on a new mix, and then I went back. I was there for 4 or 5 months in last winter, and he basically fixed his mix, and I think his mix is every bit as good as Aragon. Like, I think they're really neck and neck. I think it's awesome. I'm really proud of them, and we're really psyched to be in that mix. But yeah, we waited a year. I said no, which is a hard decision, but I just couldn't. I just knew they were going to polish and just forget it, you know?
So you already mentioned that switching to polyurethane made holds a bit more expensive, but that there was definitely a trade-off in quality and that these holds last longer. But other common criticisms of them, the biggest one kind of being that polyurethane isn't recyclable and it's not biodegradable.
Right.
In the past, you've mentioned that just by making them a longer lasting product, it creates less of an impact to the environment because you're throwing out holds less often. Right. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, are you getting customers asking for a greener product? Like, does the industry actually feel guilty about this, or is it something that really doesn't come up very much?
It's really rare that it comes up. I'm pretty far on the left. I mean, I'm a pretty lefty kind of person, and Boulder, Colorado, right? So
yeah, of course.
All of us are, and so yeah, we're not like thrilled. There's parts about the whole plastics industry that bum us out a little bit. I mean, it's full on petrochemical industry. I mean, we're a tier of petrochemical use. There was somebody, I think Nycros actually put some stuff in production, which was corn-based plastics. Okay. So in the late 90s and early aughts, there was a lot more talk about making plastics out of basically corn. And you could still you can go to maybe Starbucks, you can get coffee, you can use a fork, you can use, disposable stuff at restaurants, at fast food restaurants can be corn now. I basically think that they couldn't get, it's hard enough to get that whole thing about texture lasting to make a good quality climbing hold. It's not that hard to make one that looks good for a week. It's a lot harder to make looks good 2 years later. And I think that all the corn-based stuff just didn't wear well. I think it was just a little too soft and didn't wear well. And until somebody figures out how to put sand back in the mix, which is really tricky, it might still work. There's some people work on it every now and then. Until they figure that out, then I think the corn-based stuff just isn't. And so there again, if it's just a product that you end up throwing away much faster than the other one, then I don't think that's a solution, right?
Yeah.
Also, as far as I can tell, I've done a limited. I read about this kind of stuff. Like, I'll do some deep reading about plastics and stuff sometimes. I haven't read that deep about corn, but when I have read about alternative sources of plastic, one of the things that comes up, one of the criticisms pretty quickly is, yeah, but the stuff we have to do to it to make it plastic is just as heinous as anything you got to do to oil to make it plastic. So,
okay.
Right. So it's a bit like that old recycling argument. Hey, is recycling worth it if you spend all the gas to get the stuff to fulfill, whatever, power the machinery? So it's something like that. It's possible that we could grind up urethane, that we could fully grind the holds, get the washer out of there, grind it up and dump it back in the mix. That's not out of the question. No factory that I know has kind of invested. Like, one of these days, Dan will probably, or over at Aragon, they'll probably throw a machine in a corner and give it a shot. See if we can grind the stuff up and dump it back in the mix. Polyurethane doesn't love to be filled. Like polyester, you can put a lot of filler in. Fiber, microbeads, which make it lighter, sand. You can put all kinds of stuff, marble dust in polyester, and it's fine. Urethane, it's not great. Like you could actually make polyester stronger that way. And that's not the case with urethane. I believe every filler I've ever read about takes away from its strength. So we could probably grind them up in a corner and get 10% back in and maybe not have a problem one day. But I can't promise it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I just know there's definitely a misconception that comes up every once in a while where people say, why can't you just melt it down and remold it? But just the chemical nature of polyurethane, that can't happen.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, in general, there's thermoplastics, which a lot of plastic around us are like a roof rack box, a big giant, a Thule or Thule, however they pronounce it, a box for your car. Like a lot of us in this world have seen those or have them, and that's kind of a big volume. If you think you look at it, you're like, that seems like a volume. Can we make that? Those are thermoplastics. You could maybe remelt and recycle those. But thermoplastics, you can't pour them in open top mold. You have to use injection molding. And that's fine. And maybe we'll have some injection molded holds one day, but those molds tend to start one climbing hold mold would probably start at $5,000 for one shape and go up from there. And so that's why injection molding hasn't worked and why we don't go down that road very much. So some plastics you can melt, catalyzed poured plastics like urethane. Yeah, there's no melting. In fact, you don't want to stand over one that's on fire. That would be bad. That would be really bad.
That's a good consumer tip. Yeah. Can I ask you, why does what makes it so expensive, these injection molding molds?
Because they have to be stainless steel. So they tend to be milled 2 parts perfectly fit stainless steel molds so they can take a really high pressure.
I don't know how you would shape that to include texture off of a foam master. That would be crazy.
And then there's that, right? So all of those plastics, like your Thule rack, whatever that box, it does have a texture, but we're all familiar with that texture. It's like a little bumpy, but it's still shiny. So yeah, there's no such thing as a really dope texture that I've ever seen in an injection plastic product. And so there you go. That's a big one. That's a big problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool.
Yep.
In the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of talk, at least within kind of hold communities, talk about 3D printing and all the new technologies coming up for manufacturing different items, things like vacuum forming, stuff like that. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on if that's going to make an impact on this part of the industry.
It'll totally make an impact. It'll probably be a little bit different from how people think. So, look, eventually we'll have atomic level printers. One day we'll be able to print anything. Somewhere in between that day and now, they will be able to print good plastics that would be tough enough not to break. But even we're not even there yet. And so it's probably 10 years away before there's an affordable plastic that's tough enough to not break. And then I'm not even sure about that whole texture wearing thing. It's taken us years to figure out how to get a long lasting polyurethane texture. So 3D printing the holds themselves, it's going to be a while. Believe me, I'm all for it. And we keep an eye on it. And I ask around and I don't know as much as I need to know about it. So by the way, if anybody hears this and is interested and wants to call me and talk to me and message me about it, I'll talk to anybody about this stuff. I'm very curious to learn. But as far as I can tell, we're not going to be printing the holds. What we do need to do soon is start printing parts of the molds and to integrate it into our mold production. Because right now we do have we're not molding fast enough. We don't know how many thousands of shapes I have in the back here. It's a lot, and that's us. And like Peter Jewell, Dan Yagman, they've got shapes all stacked up here. We want to get stuff out now, and we can't mold fast enough. So here's what I think we should do. I think we should be scanning the foam holds, and I think we should be 3D printing a matrix on the back for the fins. And then we should mold that, and that's how we should get the fins. The hollow back, when you flip it over, it should look like, like a bike helmet or something. It's not like the people at the bike helmet factory are just kind of putting fin. They're just making it up every week where they want to put the structure. That's not a thing. And so it's this funny little corner. And so I would like to get us to where that's how we're bringing in the technology. Let's get smart. Let's get engineered about the hollow back fins, and let's 3D print the fins. And then we'll still mold them and we'll still pour the holds in polyurethane. But I'd love to see that. And again, anybody who wants to come here and help me work on that project, please do. We wouldn't ask anybody to work for free. We'll pay you. Come down and help me with it.
Cool,
so,
man.
Yeah.
So towards this end of stuff, I want to ask you a really vague question and kind of let you go to town on it, and I might expand later. But you are a climber, recreational, and you've had competitive intentions in the past. You've been a route setter, you've been a shaper, and of course you're now on the business end of, or at least been involved in the business end of making these holds.
Sure.
You've got kind of the 360 degree ideas of how this industry works. So when you think about plastic and where plastic is going to go, where are you hoping that plastic improves in the future? Qualities of how it handles wear, in terms of flexibility. What are you hoping comes from future polyurethanes or whatever material it happens to be?
Sure. I think the flexibility that we have now with Aragon and Composite X, the toughness and the amount of flexibility, I think that's pretty right. We might get sand put in these things. There may be a way to get sand through the pumps. It's just really expensive pumps, but we're playing with it. We're working on it. If we got that down, then we might really make like a 20 or a 30-year climbing hold. That's possible. Frankly, I'm a tiny bit concerned that it might not be the smartest thing to do business-wise.
Yeah,
but
man,
I just kind of haven't.
After a year, if you put out that eternal climbing hold.
I straight up, I'm a tiny bit worried, but I sort of can't stop myself from working on it because I just want to, we just have an obsession for quality. So I don't know, we're working on it. So there's that. There is vacuum forming plastics, which a couple of people are working on a new way to get volumes with vacuum formed plastics. That entire thing is hung up on texture. And it almost always comes down to texture. How do we get this texture right? We can get incredibly cool, super strong, light, fast, and cheap vacuum formed plastics. They're pretty cheap, right? So we could get, especially small volumes, we could just crank them out, probably lower the price. But we can't figure out how do we get a texture coating that doesn't chip off, right? And this has been a problem with volumes for a long time. Fiberglass volumes, it's very easy to make them have the material chip off.
Yeah.
I think Thrive is doing really cool work, and that they're putting urethane over fiberglass. And
yeah, exactly.
Right? I think that's awesome. That may never chip, or basically never chip, and that could be a huge part of the future. It is still tricky to get the texture. Whenever you have a shell and you put the texture on at the end, that's hard. You can kind of spray it, but sometimes it gets too stucco-y, and so it's too aggressive, and then sometimes it's too smooth. It's difficult to get a molded texture. It's difficult to pour something into a mold, so you get the liquid interacting with the surface of the mold, and you get a great texture that way. And then you go in and back it with fibers or with a tough shell product. Usually shells are made, and then you apply the texture afterwards. And so we can't figure out yet how do we get the texture to work on vacuum form.
That's really interesting. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks a lot
for
all this time you spent talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Sure. I'm sorry. I get excited, and my answers are probably always about this long. I just get really excited about this stuff. So sorry, but if they're too long, sorry.
No, the whole point is that, there's so many, of us gym guys out there that don't get a chance to hear these things. And sure. I think it makes everybody better if we kind of know what's going on the cutting edge. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap up on my end, I have a kind of obsession with getting setters a shape. So we're starting up kind of a label we call Kilter Union, and we're trying to invite anybody who's a setter who wants to come shape with me, and we can make holds, especially smaller, kind of thinner stuff. We can afford to mold. It's hard for us to promise that we can mold big kaiju for anybody, because that's just hard and slow and expensive. But people can come here, and we have an open call. Any course setter who wants to come right here. And we've got a guest bedroom we can put people up in sometimes. Sometimes we're crowded. You got to sleep in the van, but you can come shape holds with me. That's an open call for anybody. I actually don't invite other shapers as much as setters, because I think setting and shaping is so close. I think it's a lot closer than people realize. And I think a lot of setters would really appreciate it. So anyway, I want to see that. In the interest of getting more information out, yeah, we want to do the same thing.
That's cool, man. All right. Well, thanks again for all of this.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was really nice talking to you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, brother. We'll talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of Plastic Weekly. Thanks to Ian Powell for answering my questions, and thanks to you guys for listening. And for the record, it's pronounced Thule. Plastic Weekly is presented and produced by me, Tyler Norton. If you like this episode, please leave a review on iTunes. Reviews help boost the show's rankings. They make it easier for other people to find. They increase the total downloads, and ultimately they help raise my self-esteem. They really do make a big difference. Or if you prefer to spend money rather than time, you can donate to the show at patreon.com/plasticweekly. Make sure you visit plasticweekly.com to find footnotes, references, and other bonus content related to our episodes, including a link to a weird video I found of Ian almost killing himself by bouldering with a total weight of 500 pounds. If you want to get in touch with me, you can leave a comment at plasticweekly.com, and you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can send me an email to tyler@plasticweekly.com with your comments, concerns, your questions, compliments. Just tell me you're out there. Somewhere. Good luck to everyone competing this weekend, including at the Portland Boulder Rally, the Block Shop Open, the Paraclimbing Cup in Sheffield, and the Lead and Speed World Cups in Wujiang. We'll be thinking about you. Talk to you next week.